I'm Samantha Brentmore, and welcome to the Rosemoor Roundtable, a limited discussion series hosted by myself and Rose DiOro, covering a range of topics specific to the romance audiobook industry. This 8th roundtable discussion centers around navigating large-scale success in the romance audiobook industry and beyond. The Rosemoor Roundtable is recorded over a live stream and produced and distributed by Brickshop Audio in podcast format. And now, here's Rose.
Thanks so much, Samantha. Hi, everybody. This is such an exciting day. We've been planning this one for a really long time. Today, we have Kennedy Ryan and Julia Whelan with us, who I'm sure you all know and love. I certainly love their work. I'm going to just, not that they need introductions, but I'm going to give a little bit of background for them both before we dive into our conversation. Kennedy Ryan is a Rita and Audie Award-winning author, US and a USA Today best-selling author. She's been featured in USA Today, Entertainment Weekly, Glamour, Cosmopolitan, Time, O Magazine, and many, many others. And very soon you will see her work on TV as well. That's the incredible, exciting news. She has been writing or working in the romance industry since 2014. That's when her first book published. Prior to that, she had a long-standing career as a writer in other mediums, in particular in journalism, and ran a nonprofit and, just did all the things, and then became this incredible, world-renowned author. And so I think you can see why we had her on today for this conversation about career milestones and success in your field. And Julia Whelan started as a child actor in film and TV, eventually becoming known for Grace Manning in the family drama Once and Again. And Julia, you started narrating in 2009. Is that right?
I think so, yeah.
Somewhere around there? Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah.
And broke out with titles such as Gone Girl and Educated, racking up Audies, and just, becoming a household name to all sorts of audiobook listeners. And let's see, what else? You are the voice of Emily Henry and Taylor Jenkins Reid books, which are beloved. You have
and me.
And me as well. Unique experience. You've had this unique experience of being featured in the New York Times, CBS Morning, and more as a narrator. There are so few people, if any, who can say such a thing. And you were the former head of production for Autumn News app, which is now run by the New York Times.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And in addition to that, you are also an accomplished author with My Oxford Year. Thank you for listening. And now the soon-to-be-released Casanova LLC. And you have launched your own distribution platform. I just let's take a moment to let that all kind of
I was sitting here during bio being like, how can one person do so much?
And you're here to tell us. How can you do it, Julia? It's a lot. You both have just achieved so much and taken on just so many different elements in your creative fields. And truly, Samantha and I could not think of two better people to have this conversation with today, because you are uniquely positioned in this industry with all that you've done and the vast backgrounds that you have, that you bring to the work that you do today. So I'm just so pleased to be able to chat about all of this with you, and grateful that you're here today. So thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. I think both Kennedy and I, we were texting being like, did they ask the right people for this?
I was like, Julia, does that say large scale success? Me? Like, we literally were.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can understand that feeling, but as an outsider, someone who's not you too, it's so clear to me that the things that you've done are unique, right? Like, they're really, Julia, as I said, I don't know of another narrator that has had a whole feature on a show like CBS Morning, who's been in the New York Times, who's been featured in all of these major publications for narrating audiobooks. It's unusual. And so I don't know who else we would be speaking to. So trust me. I think we came to the right place, whether it feels that way or not.
Yeah. And I'll take one for the team here. Sure.
I wasn't confused about Julia.
I wasn't confused about Kennedy. That was the joke. I was just like, I'm the one who always has to remind her. We have this thing. I'm like, you're Kennedy effing Ryan. Like, come on. Like, that's the way I feel about her. But,
yeah. Yeah. Well, I can just sit here and fangirl over both of you so you don't have to do it for one another. So let's jump in. We just heard about your backgrounds and sort of the unique lanes that brought you here. I'm really curious if you've thought at all about how, well, Kennedy, maybe we'll start with you. So your background in journalism, I'm curious your thoughts about how you got to where you are and where, in terms of like starting from there and now writing in romance and being known for that. What was the path? And also how does that show up? Does that background show up in your work still today?
It definitely does. I think the path was one that I didn't anticipate. I started writing like for my city newspaper when I was 17. Like, I don't even know if it was legal. I always thought, and I always thought I was going to be this journalist who was like in a war-torn country, and then I end up writing romance. I just, went to school for journalism, focused on public relations, freelancing, lots of, like real people pieces. And I was doing that. My son was diagnosed with autism. I talk about this a lot. He was diagnosed when he was 2. By the time he was 5, I had started a nonprofit, for serving other families and also really just creating community for my family. So that's what I was doing, and before I knew it, I found myself on CNN talking about autism and, on television and writing about autism and everything I was doing was autism. And of course, raising my son. And that's a joy and a privilege. But so much of my life was all this other stuff. And you know how like I'm a romance reader first. So I started reading romance when I was like in the 7th grade and I always loved it. And then, you go to college and you have to read the serious books. So I had put romance down for a long time. But when I was in the midst of navigating some difficult times for my family, being a special needs mom, running a foundation for other special needs families, all of my writing really like went into that autism community space. I found that I needed something that was just mine, and it didn't even start with writing. It started with needing an escape and remembering how much I loved reading romance. So I'm in my 30s at that point, and I'm like, I need an escape. So I picked romance back up, which I hadn't since I was, a freshman in college, and fell in love with the genre all over again. And then thought, well, what if I am a writer. Like, what if I gave this a try? And it's a very unusual path in the sense that I joined the Georgia Romance Writers of there's Romance Writers of America, the Georgia chapter, incredibly active, taught me so much. I learned so much about self-publishing. There were so many amazing authors there. And I was like, I think I want to write a book. I wrote a book, and it used to be this thing where all these, they'd have conferences where all these agents and editors would come to these conferences and you schedule 15 minutes to pitch them. That's the big thing. And I had written this thing. It was huge. It was a romance novel's 100, maybe 100,000 words. This was 240,000 words. Okay. They were it's a little long,
It must be a trilogy.
And it ended up being a duet. It really did. But when you talk about the path, I really didn't know anything about publishing or that space. And some of the people in the chapter encouraged me just for practice, nothing will probably come of it. But when we have this conference and the agents and the editors come down just for practice, sign up for one editor, one agent so that you can get, experience pitching this behemoth book that you've written. No one's going to actually want it, but it'll be good practice. And so I sit down with this agent and I'm like, this is about the book and da, 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 da. And they had told me if they ask for, they'll either just say thank you, ask for nothing. They'll ask for a partial, which means they're interested, or they'll ask for a full. And if they ask for the full manuscript, they're really interested. And so I'm pitching, no expectations with this agent. I have one agent and one editor for practice. And the agent goes, oh, I want the full. And I was like, wait, you want the what? I was completely not expecting that. And then I sit down with my one meeting with one editor and she goes, oh, I want the full. And I was like, but that means you're really what? and that ended up being my debut novel. Two of them, because it was so long. It was a duet. So I kind of stumbled into it. I didn't have that process where it's like, oh, I have this stack of rejection letters and I'm pitching to agents, and I really didn't have that process. I kind of stumbled into it, which there are advantages, but I was so green, and there was so much that I think going through that kind of more conventional path teaches you about the industry. And I really had to crash course a lot. And then when I transitioned into self-publishing, it's a whole other learning curve. So, that's kind of how I got into writing novels. I didn't think I would be, I expected to be in, like in a war-torn country reporting from, enemy territory. So
fair, Romancelandia can feel like that sometimes.
Yes, and actually maybe that was good training. So, yeah.
And how does your, I've heard you talk about this in interviews, and I always find it so fascinating. And as an actor, I so appreciate what you say about research and just the way that you approach your writing, which clearly you're drawing from that journalism background.
Sure.
Do you feel like that approach has set your writing apart? I mean, your writing is special, right? It's unique. It's known for being different in some way and just like sucking in the reader in a particular way. And I have wondered for a long time if it is that writing approach, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
I definitely, there's no doubt that my background in journalism has shaped my creative process, which for me is probably 60% research, before I even start typing. The first thing I do is like, I have a mood board and a Spotify playlist, and I'll just ride those vibes until I have to actually start writing. But I draft a subject list, like I draft a list of people I'm going to be interviewing. And for any given book, like it could be anywhere between 10 to 20 people I interview. Thank God for Zoom, because now I interview by Zoom so that I can record the interviews. And then I go back before I start writing and I watch all those interviews and I take notes. And I usually have like a stack of books I'm reading, for any book that I'm writing. For me, that is a lot because I'm usually writing. A big part of why I write things is intellectual curiosity. I think I'm like, do I want to immerse myself so deeply in this? I want to be curious about it. And if I'm curious about it, sometimes it's outside of my lived experience. And if it's outside of my lived experience, then I think it's arrogance to assume or to presume that I know it. And so I'm very much talking to people who have lived it. I know what it's like to see your lived experience misrepresented. And I always say that my writing is first Hippocratic, first do no harm. Like if you tell a fantastic story, but you harm a marginalized group or a vulnerable population, like I don't want it. And so for me, that is like base. And so that means I end up in a lot of conversations with people who have lived experiences that I haven't. And then that next step, which is kind of beyond just journalism, is sensitivity readers. And usually for the book that I just finished, I had 8 sensitivity readers, across various stages of research, because you have these buckets of research. I had autistic characters, which of course I'm an autistic mom, but I wanted to have conversations with actually autistic people. I hired an actually autistic editor in addition to, my regular editor. And then my heroine is Afro-Latina. I got the Afro part, but I'm not Puerto Rican. And so I had a bucket of Puerto Rican sensitivity readers. So, it's like, maybe I overdo it, maybe I overcompensate, but I'd rather do that than do harm, or to flatten out an experience that should be dimensional and should be ascribed dignity. And so those conversations, those interviews, the research, it's bedrock for my creative process. And it's also insurance for me as a writer, because if I am passionate enough about a story that I want to deploy it into the world, I don't want people distracted by misrepresentations. That's not the point of the story. So I may as well try to get all of that out of the way so they can just appreciate what the story is there to do.
Yeah. And I don't know if you remember this, but when we first met, I started just like bawling because I was talking about how the Jewish representation that you've had in your books. Yes, which I have never seen in romance ever. And I know it's out there, but I had never read it. It was my first experience with it. And that was one of the first times I got to hear a little bit about what you're describing now with the sensitivity readers. And so I can say from personal experience just how impactful that is as from the reader's perspective. At least for me, it was. So yeah, I think you've answered my question and all the reasons why these extra steps that you take really set your writing apart. Thank you for walking us through all that and for doing what you do, taking that time. It's really quite special. And I'm sure has a great impact on so many of your readers. So thank you for that gift to us all. Julia.
Yes.
So you have a lifelong career as an actor, which, a lot of narrators come to narration as actors, some on screen, some on stage. I come from a stage background, but you started so young in a professional realm. I guess I'm curious what, in terms of the industry, not so much the craft, but switching gears industry-wise into narration from being a known entity on screen, were there pieces of just your knowledge base in that industry that showed up in a helpful way in transitioning to narration, or things that felt confusing? I'm curious about just sort of the influence or lack thereof in making that transition.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that, I was a child actor, but I was a very well-trained child actor. Like I was always like, I'm going to be an actor. My age doesn't matter. I was very, intent on being the best actor I could be. And the part I didn't enjoy about it was the fame. Made me deeply uncomfortable. And I kind of like ran away from Hollywood and tried to let the fame burn off a little bit. And it wasn't even like I was that popular, but I'd be recognized all the time. And that was just not a place I was comfortable. So with this job, I think one of the first things I realized was that I was always an actor where people knew my face, but not my name. And then I got into this and people knew my name and not my face. And that turning point was the drug. Like that was the high where I was like, oh, I can do this and be pretty much completely anonymous. And this is so great. And I think that the skill set I had as an actor definitely translated. I mean, emotional accessibility, any type of character work, or the vocal training, extensive vocal training. And that obviously for the marathon that is this job is incredibly important, without even getting into, character voices and accents and accessibility and that. I mean, just the not how to ruin your voice is an important part of this job. But there are certain things, the learning curve, and, when I started doing this, there wasn't really, now I think there's coaches and there's classes. And like at the time that didn't really exist. You just kind of had to learn by doing. And what would happen is I would do something in the booth. I would really feel good about it. And then I would listen back and realize that I wouldn't hear what I had been trying to do. And a lot of that came from, first of all, being able to use your body and not being able to use it in the booth, not being able to make noise or move away from the mic. And part of it was the fact that you're used to, as an actor, conveying something with your eyes. So you can say something very cynically or very dry, but you just blink on it, or you have a smile and it reads. And then I would listen back and just be like, that just sounded like I was saying that statement in total earnest, good faith. Like I did not get the cynicism, or I did not get the wryness. And so learning how, when you don't have your whole tool set at your disposal, how you compensate for that vocally. And the big part of this to me is like, what I did is kind of like losing one sense, but gaining another. Because I had come out of Hollywood and I was, I'd spent so much of my life reading scripts. but I knew I wanted to write. And so when I got to college and I was in a writing program and I was reading a ton, the thing that I came to this job with was I had an acting background and a skill set that maybe I couldn't use the full array of them in this job. But then I had this new set of skills, which was analysis and the writing part of me, and like being able to take a text on from that more like analytical English nerd place.
Mm-hmm. And what about the just like the logistics of the career itself? So I'm hearing a lot. Yeah, what you're saying makes so much sense about sort of the skills you gain or have to shift and pick up along the way for the craft transition. And I had a similar experience too, of just, well, in my case, it was scaling down, right?
Yeah.
Like being
even for theater to film, it's a bit funneling process.
Totally. And so, yeah, there is that. It just takes some time to kind of figure out what parts of your skill set you want to hold on to and what do you need to shift.
Right.
But I'm also curious for you, I mean, what you're saying about the fame of it, the facial recognition that people have and being stopped on the street and all of that. Although now I wonder if you're getting more of that again, because you are much more present, for in all the ways that we talked about before.
Still not compared to,
it's
like
not.
That bar is so high. I don't think I'll ever do that. I mean, Kennedy, do you get recognized?
I mean, not on a sometimes, but not on a wide scale. Like, I'm not famous like that. What's one of the funny things is I was in Atlanta. I don't live in Atlanta anymore, but I was at a stoplight and looking a hot mess too, I might add. And somebody like honks their horn beside me, and I look over. She goes, "Kennedy Ryan." I was like, "Oh my gosh!"
No pictures, please. No pictures.
Yes. And a few times in the airport, but usually it's when you have these big conferences and everybody's in town. That's when it happens to me more so than just like, that kind of thing.
I still haven't no one has recognized my face. I think there've been a few people who have seen like a name on a credit card or something and been like, wait a minute. Recently I had the experience though of I was in Ashland, Oregon, and I was going from my like Airbnb down to a tea room to meet one of my friends, and I was kind of hustling, and I came to a crosswalk, right as this guy was pulling up to a stop sign, and we kind of had that like, no, you go first. No, you go first.
Yeah.
And he was like, no, go. So I just was like, thanks. And I'm jogging across the crosswalk and his window's down, and I hear my voice coming from his car.
No.
So that was the first time that's happened.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
I'm actually kind of surprised that's the first time that's happened. I imagine like your voice is
Rose. Like I think
that's a good point.
Have to come to me to like
yes. And I haven't seen I haven't like come across someone reading my book, which is like the same thing, where you look up and someone's reading your book. It's kind of like the same thing. That hasn't happened to me.
Well, we're like ebook people. Like let's be honest, like we're not those,
Yes.
not the books that people want to be seen reading.
And I'm primarily an audio girl, so that's my bread and butter.
Yeah.
So you both have, I guess, Julia, as an actor, and most of us actors, our jobs, our whole life is spent waiting for someone to give us a job, right? Like, and that shows up in different ways. We audition, we, build connections, all of that. But it's a lot of the grind, right? And Kennedy, I know you've been both traditionally published and indie published. I would imagine with indie publishing, there's more of that grind in a lot of ways because you're doing so much of the legwork. Right. I'm curious to hear about what that hustle looks like now. So we've kind of established this journey that you've both been on in your careers. How has that shifted, that legwork that you have to do, where you might have started versus now? And Julia, for you in particular, because you had this following on screen, your hustle may have looked different when you first started in narration. And I'm sure even from when you started to now probably looks vastly different. So can you both talk a little bit about sort of that journey?
Yeah, I mean, I started out in traditional publishing with a lot, which a lot of people don't know, like, because I built my career as a self-published author. So a lot of people don't know that's kind of where I started. But I pretty quickly pivoted to self-publishing, and that is a grind. That is, you do everything. I don't literally mean I'm designing covers because I'm awful at that, but you're responsible for everything. You're responsible for the editing. You're responsible for the marketing. And at first, it's probably just you. And then you start to kind of add pieces to your team to help, delegate some of that. For me, that transition, it's been very interesting because 5 of my self-published titles were bought, and re-released as traditional. Last year, Bloom bought 5 of my self-published books and re-released them as traditional. So when I look at my catalog, there's very little left, that is completely self-published. And it does look different, because I'm not necessarily as much like doing ads, because they've been bought by traditional publishers. And I'm like, that's you now, my writing schedule looks different because when you're publishing as a self-published author, I published more books when I was self-publishing. I've never been someone. I have friends who publish 4 to 6 books a year, which is not especially with my process, which is just not even possible.
Right.
But I can remember one year publishing 2.5 books, and I felt like I'll never do that again, like for my process. And I know a lot of people, especially when they're self-publishing, publish more than that. I'm publishing less, the editorial process, the marketing process, all that requires is a different kind of grind. It's okay, here are the interviews you're going to do. Here's the bookstores you're going to go to. Here's the, and the editorial process is much more, is expanded, where it's not just like me and an editor, and then I'm like sending it off to a copywriter. It's like we're back and forth several times, several iterations, and then it's copyright, and copy edits, and then it's like final proofs, and then it's, it's a whole process. It's a much more elongated process. But I think it's more in keeping with the pace of what I write, like organically. But I'm a hustler, it's hard for me to turn that off. So even when I'm traditionally publishing, I find myself acting like an indie author. I'm constantly, look, this person is now writing about romance, and and also it's my PR brain. So I'm very much like always looking for ways to promote. I am not the kind of person to ever presume that anyone's going to work harder for me than I am. So when I come into a traditional space, I'm still like, I'm not just showing up with my book. Like, I want to see about marketing. I want to be involved in that. I'm very involved in covers and branding. And I always have a sense of what is going to represent my story. And I always say this, like, coming from self-publishing where you're running your own business, I am never looking for a boss again. I'm looking for partners, not bosses. I don't have bosses anymore. So I am constantly like, who wants to partner with me? We can do this together, but I'm going to be involved. And so the people who work with me, they know that about me. They know what to expect. And so it's hard for me to turn the indie hustle off. I still, find myself functioning that way a lot, actually.
Do you feel like your success and all the things that you bring to the table in your background have afforded you the ability to say, we're going to be partnered? Like, I'm not looking for a boss. Do you think that, do you think that's something that you have to earn? Or
yes. Not saying like I've earned it, but I think that, I've been publishing for a while, and I think that the people who approach me because of what I've done and because of what I do, so, and if someone comes to me trying to change that, then that's not the right working relationship for me. And that's also not me saying that I don't listen, that I don't learn, that I'm not open to hearing other people's perspective. But someone's not going to come and say, oh no, this is not what you should be writing. for me, I am very fortunate in working with publishers who have said to me, like, we want you because of what you do. You're not looking to change what you do. And I can contrast my experience now in traditional publishing with what it was like when I first started. Because, nobody knew who I was. It was no money. It was just, coming in like off the street. And it's a definite different experience, So, and I don't come in like, you can't tell me nothing, it's not like that. But at the same time, it's like I am running a business, I know my brand, I know my readers, I'm very clear on my trajectory. And for me, like some people, their brand is like small town, or your sports or your whatever. My brand is my writing. Do you know what I mean? Like you're not going to look at my catalog and say, Kennedy writes sports or Kennedy writes politics or Kennedy writes whatever. Like that's not how you categorize me. The creative conviction behind my writing is my brand. When you read my stories, those stories are coming from a place of conviction. And I'm not going to be involved with anyone who's going to tamper with that.
Yeah. Wow. I feel like I just want to process everything you just said. It's so juicy. There's so much in there.
That's why she's Kennedy effing Ryan.
That's right.
Julia effing Whelan.
No, that's why, man, because this is why I think I so respect her and why I look up to her, because it is someone who has made a space for themselves in indie by just being the writer she is.
Yeah.
Not by like chasing a trend or doing, there's nothing wrong with that. And those are also writers who know what they're doing and run their business like a business. And I so respect that. Kennedy came in and said, I think I can do it better myself. And she did it. Mm-hmm. And now it's a question of, I only want to partner with people who add something to that, not, challenge it. And I just think that's awesome.
And I'm blessed to have I don't want to come off as like I'm the boss, but
you're not.
If I'm just blessed to be working with people who came to me and said, we love what you're doing. How can we partner with you to reach more people doing that? Because there are advantages and limitations to being an indie author. You're most likely not going to reach as many people or be in as many stores or whatever. And for me, the stories I was writing specifically centering Black and brown women, I wanted to see those I wanted to see those books on shelves and Target, and I wanted to see them on billboards, and I wanted to see, I want those women to see themselves in those spaces. And that was strategically for me, part of that decision is expanding not only my brand, but expanding spaces where marginalized women would see themselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Julia, I feel like you have done, you also seem to have, at this point now, positioned yourself that you can create things that you want to see come to fruition. We're going to talk about Audiobrary in a little bit, but for now, just in keeping with this idea of the grind and the hustle and kind of getting from point A to point B, can you zoom out on all of the many things that you do and you've created and talk a little bit about that? And was there a turning point for you where you felt like you gained more control of the work that you were getting to put out into the world?
Yeah, I know I've been reflecting on this, that I think for me as someone who started so young and has made a living in the arts, but the business of the arts for my whole life, I know when I reach the end of something. I know when, either for my own personal reasons, when I'm like, I'm done with this, I'm bored by it, or I can't keep participating in this system. I could feel that sort of happening, because I did this with Hollywood, where I was like, I don't want to do on camera anymore. I don't want to be a part of this system. Along with, as audio became, I was there I got in at the right time. I was given the right opportunity. I made the most of it, but it wasn't intentionally making the most of it. I was never consciously building a brand or anything like that. But as the industry exploded around me, and as audiobooks became huge, I saw all the ways that the industry itself was not acknowledging that. They were just kind of keeping it like, don't look at how much money we're making, right? Just, you just keep doing what you do, and, we'll just keep paying you what we pay you. And I reached a point where I just hit a wall with how unfair certain parts of this industry are, specifically that narrators don't get royalties in traditional. And it makes no sense for me, coming from an actor background, like the thought that I would not get, like, I get residuals for TV movies I did when I was 12. Like, what are you talking about? Are you kidding me? And being in publishing, which is, part of based on a royalty model, it just made zero sense to me that we were not part of this thing we'd helped build. And what had occurred to me over this time, that was only a view I was able to have of this industry when I had the privilege to be able to step back from it a little bit. So much of audiobook narration, because it is so poorly compensated, is just about volume. And when you are living in the booth, you do not have the time to see the forest for the trees. And the slow process of writing 2 novels, having passive money coming in from those books now, having the time I spent at Autumn, just being able to get my head above water a little bit, where I could pull back and I wasn't recording 70 books a year anymore, gave me the ability to look at this and go, this is unsustainable. This will not work. And to your point about, I can't delegate to save my life. Like, there are things I know I can't do. I should not be doing audio editing, so I don't. I should not be doing graphic design, so I don't. Those are things that I can, but in terms of like my day-to-day life, I wouldn't even know where to begin to have an assistant. Wouldn't even know what to tell them. Like, to me, that would just be more work explaining to them how to do it, right? So but I definitely, I subscribe to, and this is just from, again, my experience in multiple industries now at this point over my life. Mark Duplass has that great speech, which I think was a commencement speech, where he was talking about in indie filmmaking, you're always waiting for that next meeting. You're waiting to be discovered. You've got this guy comes in and says, I really like what you do. And the whole point of his speech, the line he keeps returning to is, the cavalry is not coming. You keep thinking, okay, now I've reached this point where someone will come in and help me, will take this burden and like make this happen. The cavalry's not coming. And like, that has lived in my head for probably 15 years, of the people who come in, who say they're going to do something, who don't, who, have, it's a very, success creates a very like little, what's the children's book? I don't have kids. I'm like, with the things, with the little red hen thing. Is that the one that's like, I'll help you bake the bread, but I would, and then they don't.
Yes. I can't think of
I can't think of it either.
I know what you're talking about.
In the comments may think of it.
The analogy. But anyway, it's you have to, as Kennedy said, to me, just like be responsible for, no one's going to work harder for you than you. And I don't like this stuff. Like, I don't like the brand building. I don't like the self-promotion. This was exactly what I hated about on camera. But at the same time, someone once said to me when I was on camera and someone gave me like an upgrade to a hotel room that I would have never gotten unless I had been famous. And I said, I don't like that feeling of like it, using it. And he just said, why not? It uses you every day. And there is a part of that is like, my brand, for whatever it is worth, is being used every day by the people who make money off of it. And I'm trying to restructure that.
Yeah. Wow. Little red hen. Thank you.
Thank you.
We needed that. You said it. You said little red hen. Apparently that's the title.
But then I had this moment where I was like, that's not right. There's another one that's like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's like an archetypal story, I suppose. Yeah. I just listening to you talk about all of that, I'm wondering if you feel, again, because you have this particular position in this industry and you're noticing things and you've been afforded the ability to step back, right? Like, I think for a lot of people a lot of narrators, that grind, that like getting out as many books as you can a year is the success.
Yes.
Right? Like that is it. That's the cap.
Right.
And to be someone who can step back from that is its own sort of, it just speaks to where you are in your career. Do you feel like, I mean, it sounds like creating Audiobrary was something you did because it was something you wanted to exist. And I have to imagine you thought it should also exist for other narrators.
Yeah. If we're going to have this sustainability, any kind of sustainability moving forward, then we have to change the structure that currently exists because it's not going to work for us in the future.
Right. Do you feel like you have a responsibility to your industry to make changes like that, to implement that? You did it, right? You're taking this time out of your career to make it. Does it come from a place of feeling like I've arrived at this point and so now I must show up in this way? Or is it some other sort of motivation?
No, I mean, I don't feel a responsibility to it, but I genuinely love it. And I want to see it survive. And I want to see the people that I love in this industry. Like we are by far, and again, I say this as someone who has worked in many different mediums and in the arts, audiobook narrators are just the best people. They are just truly the best people. And I want them to be treated better. And I want them to be a part of the process and the success that they, like I said, that they have helped create. And I don't think anyone else was, I don't know that anyone, certainly not on the business side, no one was going to do this because there's no incentive to do it. Why would you give away money? There's no corporate reason to do this. And so I'm not saying in any way I'm the only person to do this, and I hope other people do it. But it was worth a shot to me because it was either I'm so frustrated that I leave the way I left on camera, or I try to, on my way out, try to fix something and we'll see if it works. But at this point, it was like, Hollywood's not fixable. This I feel is actually fixable because the product is the essential, like such an elemental, fundamental part of being human, which is storytelling. And people want that. And like, this is something that we have the fact that people want this on our side. So,
yeah, it makes sense. So Julia, you're moving into sort of this new element of the industry with this distribution platform, and Kennedy, you're now, I don't know where you are in process with the television show of Before I Let Go, but what has that been like for you, this sort of next step? And did you I have a couple, I'm going to just throw a bunch of questions at you about this and you can answer them in whatever order you want. First of all, I just want to fact check. I thought I heard you say at some point in an interview that was the first book you wrote. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. It Before I Let Go in its original form actually predates my debut novel. I had written it, on a whim when I was thinking, could I be a writer? Like this kind of writer? I wrote it, full novel. It was very different than the final version of Before I Let Go. And it was like the character names were different. It was a divorced couple. They did experience the same losses. They did have kids. They had their own business. Like the structure was there. But I always say that this book is waiting for me to grow up because I wrote it like 15 years ago, and I've changed so much as a mom and as a wife. And it had all of the hurt and none of the healing. And I think that was because I had never experienced real depression or therapy, or there's just so much I've experienced. It was a young woman's book, and I've lived 15 more years and it completely changed me. And so it's a very different novel, but the basic structure of it was there. I had written it kind of on a whim. The only people who ever read it were my sister and my husband. They were like, this is so good. And I'm like, yeah, your family always says that. And then when I was when I won the Rita for Long Shot, which was self-published, which I'm very proud of, the fact that it won as a self-published novel. Traditional publishers started coming to me, when they approached me about, we want you to come back to traditional publishing now. And I really didn't do anything with that for like maybe 2 years. I really just was like, no, I'm good, where I am. And then I decided, for a lot of the reasons that I was talking about before, really wanting to put stories about marginalized people and put Black and brown women on covers in bigger spaces, and really wanting to export that. That was a big part of me making the decision to transition from, okay, I will go back to traditional publishing, still hybrid, but I will go back. And I really had no idea what I wanted to write, because that's not how I come to story, is like, okay, this is what's so big, and there's nothing wrong with this. This is what's so big right now, or these are the tropes, or these are the whatever. Like I'm usually not so much inspired as incited to write. Like I see something happening, I'm like, that's pissing me off, I'm gonna write about it, there's a lot of female rage at the bottom of my books,
Yeah.
And so nothing was making me furious, and I was like, I don't know what I write when I'm not mad. And my husband goes, what about the divorce book? And I'm like, that crap, that trash. He goes, no, baby, it was good. Like, just pull it out and just look at it. And I was like, maybe it's salvageable. And that's what became, before I let go. And so, yeah, that was the first. I mean, technically, that's the first book I ever wrote. It's very different. Like, I would not cheat the sensitivity readers, the therapists, the editors who were so involved to say it's the same book. But yeah. I forget what your other question was.
I didn't get to them yet because I was curious about that. But my questions were going to be, did you ever set your sights on this moment? Did you ever think, like, I'm going to write something, I want it, especially thinking about, I want, Black and brown faces on covers. Did you ever think, I want like an even bigger platform, I want more presence, and kind of find your way there? Or did this come as a surprise? Like, at what point in the journey did this, and it's happened before, but there were other iterations that some books that were maybe going to be turned into a movie or TV show that didn't end up happening.
Right.
So, like, was that always part of the hopefully part of the plan for you, or did it just come your way?
I think there's a couple of ways to answer this. Like, I think that there's a younger version of me who'd be like, oh my gosh, no, like, it's such a surprise. Like, I can't believe this is happening. But I think the more honest version of me is like, authors, I think all of us are like, wow, I would love to see my books on television. For me, at a certain point, very early on in my career, I decided that was something I wanted, because I felt like I was doing worthy work. I felt like the stories that I was telling, I wanted to see those stories in bigger spaces. I was not seeing enough of those stories on television and film. And I wanted to do it. And I felt like my work was capable of it. Sometimes I think we as women like shy away from those things because it sounds like ambition, which feels like kind of a dirty word, but for me, I can say that has been the trajectory that I've, since very early on in my career, have seen for myself, to the point that when I encountered someone on my team, and this is going to sound bad, but when I would encounter people like around me on my team who didn't see that, I would fire them. I'm like, like I remember having an agent, and I won't call names or anything like that, but I remember saying, I really believe that my work could do this. And she was like, it's hard and you might want to manage your expectations, It wasn't, she's right. It is hard. And she's right that like the vast majority of things that are optioned are not even ever made. Like it's a slim little, group of things that are optioned and make it all the way to screen. For me, it was her not actually seeing what I was capable of, her not actually believing that my work deserved the energy it was going to take for us to get it there. Anytime I've encountered at certain points in my career, when I decided to transition from traditional publishing to indie publishing, an agent was like, I don't think that's smart. I don't agree with that. And really like that, I was like, well, we don't work together anymore. Like we're misaligned. So for me, I'm not saying I always knew this was going to happen, but what I am saying is that I felt like I was writing work that was capable of it. And I started making decisions that would put me there. Meaning, I did get rid of that agent who didn't believe in me. And then when I got with a literary agent and all the authors in that agency used this one film and television agent. She didn't hustle hard enough for me. I said, you're not mine. I'm going to go find my own, and that agent that I found is the one that got behind before I let go and took it out. And you know what I mean? Like every decision was pointing toward this and working toward this. So for me, it's a lot of luck. It's a lot of blessing. It's all of those things. It's a lot of people who are working on my behalf and with me and in partnership with me. But it is definitely something that I saw for myself for a very long time. Yes.
And do those partnerships and the conversations that you're having with these creative partners in this endeavor, how do they differ from the kinds of partnerships and conversations you have when publishing a book? And Julia, for you, similarly, I'm curious about the publishing Casanova LLC, the way that you're doing it through Audiobrary, and before your other books were with Harper. Talking a little bit about the difference in that process as well, and if you two, there might be some similarities in sort of the changes you had to make in the way that you're having those conversations and developing those different mediums.
Kennedy, please keep going. You're on a roll.
I am coming into television not like Julia, knowing very little, so I am not someone who's going to barge in like, you gotta be. I'm very fortunate that my book went into like an 8-way auction, so it was like it was very competitive. So there were a lot of studios, production companies that wanted the book and that gave us leverage. And so I am an executive producer, for the show. So that gives me a certain amount of say. But at the same time, I'm walking into this very humble, like with a humility of like, I don't know the industry the way you do. I want to learn. I'm here to learn. What I do know is my story. What I do know is what readers have responded to. And I am not going to be one of these writers who's so attached to exactly the way I wrote it that I'm not understanding that it might, morph and change as it goes into a different space. So I'm learning a lot, and I'm very fortunate, and I'm leaning on my team, like I'm with CAA and I have an incredible team, film, television agent. I have a great literary agent. I have an amazing lawyer, entertainment lawyer. Like, I feel like I really took time to make sure I had the right team around me. And when I don't know things, I feel like I put people around me I can trust and who are smarter than me in the ways where I'm not smart yet, who can really give me wisdom. And I feel very well guided, so.
Yeah. I mean, that's what you want to do. Like, that's the goal. So for me, for Casanova LLC, I think it's so interesting that I'm not even sure if you can call what I'm doing here going indie, because I'm not even really going indie. I'm like, it's reversed. Like I'm starting with audio first through a platform that I built. Like, it's not going into even an indie ecosystem. So I don't even know what I'm doing. Like, I have all of these amazing indie authors who I'm sure would be happy to like answer any questions I have. And in fact, Kennedy did this for me recently, but it's also like, I'm not even there yet. It's definitely different. I can say it's, different from obviously being in the HarperCollins machine and, having a book coming out traditionally, but I don't even have a book yet. Like, we are just dealing with audio. And so it is my own completely weird little world right now. And I mean, I love it. I'm enjoying it. I'm not like a naturally entrepreneurial person. I would much rather just be like performing and writing and not have to worry about anything. But again, it's like when you're looking at how something is done, sometimes things just have to be fixed, and you've got to take a stab at fixing them. But I'm enjoying it. I really am. Like, I'm enjoying having instant data. A pre-order comes in and I'm like, that happened. I saw that happen, as opposed to like, well, in 6 months we'll find out, if that day meant anything. So yeah, I mean, it's been educational. It's also hasn't been terribly surprising. Like, I think I had enough of a good understanding of how this was going to go, that I'm like, yeah, that's about what I turns out I knew enough to be pretty much correct in my assumptions, but we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, anytime you're starting something brand new or, inventing something from the ground up.
Inventing, Julia.
Yeah, that's what you're doing. The answer to that question is you're inventing.
And I did this. I worked at a startup and was like, absolutely never again. Absolutely not. What was I? But, again, but it's that thing of when you're tired of asking other people to do the right thing or to fix something that they have no incentive to fix. And, it's worth a shot. Like I said, it's worth a shot. But yeah.
That makes me wonder. And thank you for listening. A big part of the story is about AI looming over audiobooks. And obviously that is that's very real. That's happening right now. So that's a really hot topic in our community. And I imagine you've had to navigate. I know I've had to navigate that as an actor. I imagine you have as well. And Kennedy, I don't know if that's come up for you with audiobooks, if you're feeling any of that heat rising in the industry. But for you, Julia, in building this platform, which is putting more putting more power into the hands of narrators. How does that factor in? How does the big bad AI monster factor in?
What's funny is when I was writing, thank you for listening, I was like, I need to address this, but I also knew that this was a moving target. Like at every point when I would write it and then I would revise it, I would be dealing with a little bit more information and then a little bit more information. And so at a certain point, you're just like, I was like, this is what it's going to be. This is going to be like time stamped for exactly like when this book came out, that's what we were talking about. And I think that for me, my sort of optimistic take on all of this, and this is not to diminish in any way how it's upsetting the industry and it's changing lives, and I don't want to take anything away from that. But my optimistic bent is that for the longest time, since this was the only mode of production, we were not getting the respect that we deserved because there was nothing to contrast us with. Mm-hmm. So for me, I look at that and it's like the way that I feel, I used this analogy before, but it's the way that I feel about plastic plants, where it's like that does its thing. It is what it needs to be for what it is, but people still have real plants because they want to have a relationship to something and they want to watch something grow and they want to see their actions affect this thing. When electricity happened, people didn't get rid of candles. Candles, again, this is an elemental human thing of flame and fire, and it's atmospheric, and it makes us feel a certain way. That is a very different thing than that. And so for me, I look at this going, that's here. It was always going to be here. This was always happening. As much as narrators might want to scream about it, I mean, this is the mines closing, this is the factories, like, I get it. It is incredibly disruptive, but the people that are going to determine the future of this are not the narrators, it's the authors, it's the consumers. And that's the big X factor in all of this, are the consumers, what do the consumers want?
Right.
I'm betting on the fact that they still want human storytellers. And to me, I have this, my feeling about it is, if the entire industry is restructuring, if it's burning to the ground a little bit, let's rebuild it in the image we want to see that is sustainable for us moving forward. This is actually an opportunity, the way these things are. And I get that it's scary and I get that it's existential. And again, this is only coming from the fact that I have the privilege to step back and I'm not trying to do 70 books a year to pay the bills anymore.
Right.
So I get it. I'm in a very different position, but I look at this going, where do we want to be in 5 years?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, it's authors are going to be dealing with the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't think I thought about AI very much. I didn't get it. Like, I didn't understand the threat that it was, and I didn't understand that they were using our work to train AI, which was very disturbing, that was happening and we didn't even know it. There's so much that's disturbing about it, but I think you're right, Julia, in that I'm always going to want a human voice. We can't control it. I have a very specific perspective on it. We can't control it, but I think that you can just continue to be excellent in what you do. And that's what you're doing. That's
creating a contrast. Like I said, this is to be combative is, there's a performative aspect to it as well. And like, whatever. And there is, but it's here.
Yeah.
It's here.
Yeah.
So the question is, how are you going to use it to differentiate yourself?
Right.
And for narrators, I think we're threatened by this thing that is frankly just a voice. Like, that's not our job. Our job is to bring emotional connectivity to what we do. It's the fact that we read it ahead. It's the fact that we know what we're saying.
Yes. Yes.
That is, and that's what I'm saying is, like, hopefully it's actually serving as a contrast to what we do, and that they are two different products in my mind. And the same way that there will be AI author farms that there already is, that just like are churning stuff out, and people will read it and just be like, yeah, that was okay.
Yeah.
But it's never going to be Kennedy Ryan's voice.
It sounds like you're describing sort of parallel industries rather than AI is coming in and infiltrating this one.
And like I said, it is because people are this is an existential, like I said, I don't want to diminish the fact that this is going to change the industry, but this industry has had, like any industry, has had moments of change throughout it. There have been inflection points throughout it when we stopped cutting tape and went to digital, when Audible boomed in 2012 and a bunch of people came into the industry, and when it boomed again in 2020. And it's always going to be reshaping. And again, not to diminish the existential threat of people's livelihoods and how that's going to change, but it is a parallel thing to me. I think that's right, Rose. That's how I feel about it. And God forbid we start trying to compete with it. To say, well, I'll lower my rates or whatever to be, able to get a human. For that.
No, it should be valued even more, I would think.
Right?
Yeah.
That's how I'm trying to spin this, if that makes sense.
I think about this a lot. It really reminds me of when Kindles came out, when e-readers came out, and sort of I wasn't working in the industry yet, but I was reading a lot of articles at the time from people who were working in publishing, and the fear of what that was going to do to the industry. And I don't have the data on this. And Kennedy, you may know, and both of you may know more about this than me, but it seems like the introduction of those e-readers actually created more readers in the end, and helped a boom in the industry. And I think, as you said, Julia, like, imagine people lost jobs, right? Like, people who were working on layout and all the elements of creating a physical book.
And again, those bookstores, but look at the journey that brick and mortar bookstores have been on in the last 10 years. I mean, this is where, again, I think because I've worked in the arts for so long, and like what I do, the job is art, but we're in business. And I think sometimes reminding people you've got to have the bird's eye view of business and business rhythms and business cycles, and like just be aware, be self-aware of you in this larger thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But again, it's hard when you're doing 70 books a year and you're just trying to keep the lights on. And yeah, it's an inflection point, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So much to think about and unpack there. But I did just really appreciate that was an element in your book, because obviously it's a big part of.
Well, so much of that book, writing that book, so much of it was like, first of all, I didn't know. I mean, when I first came up with this idea, which was a long time ago, this was like 2000. I mean, I've been working on some version of this story for about 10 years before the book came out, but the book itself was kind of in development starting in like 2017. And the big question mark over it was, were there enough people who would even care or know about audiobooks to understand the basic premise of this book? And like coincidentally, by the time I sat down and was actually actively writing it, taking this gamble, was 2020 when it really kind of exploded again. And at every point, my decision making was, what does the audience need to know? And like, what do I talk about in this industry? And there were just certain things that I felt, because a lot of it was even introducing people to the concept of there are actual human beings behind these books that you listen to. And I get those comments now on posts when people post about the book saying, I never even thought about, like the job behind the job. It's not what I thought. That's not how I thought it happened. And so just trying to pick things about the industry that like would clue people into what was happening. But
yeah, I mean, talk about feeling seen in a book and kind of going behind the curtain a little bit. I know I've told you this story before, but I was listening to your book on a plane on the way to Love in Vegas as a romance narrator on their way to a romance convention in Vegas, which was the most meta thing that has ever happened to me.
Yeah.
But I was so, and I didn't actually know I didn't know much about what the book was going to be about until I started listening to it, having the experience of the main character. I felt really seen in that moment. And I know it sounds like you're writing it with, other readers in mind and shedding light on what this is like. But I think for a lot of narrators, I imagine a lot of narrators had a similar experience to me in that. So I wanted to shift gears a little bit. You were talking about sort of being in the midst of your industry, being able to zoom out and see what's needed and think about your own needs in the industry. And you, Kennedy, as the first Black Rita Award winner. And I don't know, were you the first person of color to win that award as well?
I don't know if I was the first person of color. I know I was the first Black author to win it. No, I wasn't, because Alexis Daria won the year before.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was the first Black author to win it. And then Nisha Sharma won the same year. She was first Southeast Asian. And Minx Malone actually won that same night for a novella. So it was kind of a big night. A big night, yeah, for marginalized authors. So yeah.
So that's a big deal. And also sort of not on the flip side, but in another way, you had your book Real won an Audie and had done some really, I would say, groundbreaking things in it with original songs, and just the way that was produced was so new and different. Do you feel like these, I don't want to say trend setting, but these accomplishments, these things that are new and different in the industry, a similar question to what I asked Julia earlier in our conversation, do you feel like they have put you in a particular position where you have a responsibility to your readers, to your industry, in particular that Rita Award and being the first Black Rita Award winner? Has that had an impact on what you decided to do after that, and the choices that you make in your writing? And I'm going to throw another additional question in here that's related as well. There was a recent Kirkus Review article that came out written by Jennifer Prokop, who was another guest on the roundtable, about expanding the genre of romance. And you were a part of that article, in particular for Before I Let Go, and the fact that it opens with this divorced couple. So these are, a handful of things here that have kind of set you apart in the industry. And I'm wondering what kind of responsibility, if any, do you feel comes along with that? Do you feel like you have set yourself up as a risk taker in the industry, and do you need to keep up with that at all?
I didn't like set out to set myself up, as a risk taker, as much as just doing what felt right for me, what felt authentic for me. I've always been interested in writing certain stories. It's interesting because even when I wrote Long Shot, which is the book that won the Rita. My agent at the time I was self-published. My agent at the time was pitching it traditionally. And one of the editors was telling me, well, this isn't romance. No one wants to read this. Romance readers won't read this, So for me, it wasn't like I want to be this vanguard kind of, it's just, to me, romance was always capable of so much. You know what I mean? Like for me, the way I approach romance, I think is, I want the swoon, I want the spice, I want the happily ever after, but like the way I'm coming into story, I think just kind of automatically might expand some of what people have seen from romance, because I think of romance the way I've said this before, the way I think about comedy, like when you're a comedian, especially a good one, especially a satirist, you're coming in, you're funny, the defense is lower, and then all of a sudden it's like, bam, this is the thing I really want you thinking about. And you're like laughing and you're like, wait a minute, hold up. Now I'm thinking about social justice. Now I'm thinking about how this thing is wrong. Now I'm thinking about why is the world like this? But I thought I was just here to laugh. And for me, that's how I come into romance is you come for the swoon, you come for, I'm drawing you in, but all of the time I have something I want to talk about. I have a grid for why I write the books I do. It's like 3 things: intellectual curiosity, because I'm curious. And if I'm going to put so much of my life into it, I'm like, I want it to be something I'm actually interested in learning about. Creative conviction, which for me means, is this something that I actually believe in? If you're like a strengths finders person, belief is like in my top 3, and meaning and belief and change, it's the engine for me in everything. And then artistic urgency. Like for me, I'm like, there's something that's going on in the world right now that deserves light and that deserves discourse. And I want to leverage my art to do that. And so for me, because that's how I come to story, which is because I'm coming to story with that, you're going to get it all the time with every story. And it feels expansive. It just feels to me like what I want to write. It feels expansive to some people not because romance is not capable of a lot, but because sometimes people have limited expectations of what romance would do. And some of that is patriarchy. And some of that is people assuming that anything that women do and that women run and that centers our agency and centers our desire is going to be this one thing. And I think there's a lot of us who are constantly adding layers, constantly adding dimension, constantly asking you to interrogate things that are going on in the world through romance. And so for me, for some people that feels different and that feels expansive. For me, that's just how I come to story. So, I don't know if that makes sense, but.
For sure.
It definitely does. I call it the spoonful of sugar.
Yes.
Philosophy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So did I answer all your question? Did I answer everything? Okay.
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay.
So both of you have, as we keep talking about, you've reached certain levels in your careers. And there are wonderful things that come along with that. And there's the ability to step back and kind of look at the bigger picture. Are there things that you miss? Are there things that you have to say no to that you wish you didn't have to? What's lost in getting the things that you want? And then how do you move the goalpost, right? Like what comes next when you've achieved, when your book is being turned into a TV show and when you have this brand new platform of your own making? What's next after that?
I don't think you ever have to remind. because I never feel like I've reached anything. So I don't I never have to be like, well, what am I going to do next? I mean, if anything, I'm on the other side of it, which is I really should have taken a break. Like after last year, I really should have taken a break. I get to these kind of turning points in my life where I've pushed. I mean, the candle is so burned down at both ends, but then it's like the next opportunity presents itself and I go, let's do it. Let's go. So for me, I don't know. I can't answer the what's lost question because I've literally been working since I was 12. I don't know. Like, I love my life. I love the people in it. I love where I live. I love my husband. I'm so satisfied with like the elementals of my life. And so if anything, I just have this, like there's always this lingering fantasy of just, what if I just, what if I bounced, right? What if I just said, I'm gonna I don't know, open a tea shop? What if I walked away from everything? So that's the only thing. But yeah, otherwise this is my normal. Like my normal is just running myself into the ground and trying to jump from one thing to the next. And, yeah.
I think that's very actory of you.
It is. Yeah, it definitely comes from the actor insecurity of like, the phone may never ring again.
Yeah.
What if I never work again?
Right.
Yeah.
What about you, Kennedy?
I think that when we were talking at the beginning, like I was like large scale success, like I feel that like people sometimes are like, what was that moment when you like knew you broke out? And I'm like, has it happened? Like I don't think in those terms at all. I think for me, like when people ask me questions about like when will you feel successful? Like I felt successful many times because I think I figured out for me what success is, and it's not this thing that moves. So much of success for me is rooted in impact. So much of success for me is not, did you, make the New York Times or did you sell a lot of books? Because that will like come, go. It might happen. It might not happen. And I don't like attaching my success to something that is so out of my control. I like and if I was chasing someone else's idea of success, when I obtain it, it feels hollow. And so for me, I attach success to, okay, you're writing stories out of your creative conviction. You're writing stories for impact. Are readers feeling impacted? So for me, when I start getting DMs from people who are like, I read Before I Let Go and now I'm in therapy, or people who read Long Shot and they're like, I read Long Shot, I was in an abusive relationship, now I'm leaving. Like for me, that is success. And everything else is their goals. There are things that I'm like number one, when we're talking about StrengthsFinder, I'm like number one achievement. So I always am like going to be like, boom, boom, like what's next, what next? But there's a difference for me between like achieving and what makes me feel successful. And for me, what makes me feel successful is when I feel like there's something transformative that happens when my work creates with the people I wrote it for. And so that's what feels like success for me. I have goals. I've always wanted my books on television. That's happening, that's happening for me. And I'm really excited about it. I want more of that. I want that to happen over and over and over again. But if it doesn't, I still have something that I have a metric for success that I have created for myself that feels meaningful. And so I have felt, so I don't have to say, oh, now I feel successful. I felt successful since I wrote my first book and it didn't sell very many copies. And people started telling me that, something about it changed their lives, so that I want to keep that. I want to keep that.
A lot of lessons in there. It's a lot. There's a lot to learn from what you just said. It's really, yeah. Yes.
Because the goalposts will automatically move. They just
Always.
will. And I don't actually know. I think honestly, unless you're failing, you're living in success.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for me, and even when you fail, you learn enough that it becomes a success. I just don't, I'm not even sure that that's something that's measurable.
Yeah.
But
no, I think that I feel so similarly. It can only be determined by you, right? And are you living your life the way you want to be? And that could look a million different ways. And Kennedy, what you said in particular about people being moved by your story and that being your stories and that being the measure of success, or being inspired to go out and make a change in their own lives. Like that is so beautiful. And I've been fortunate to have moments like that with work that I've done, whether I wrote it or I performed it or whatever. And I agree, those are the moments that feel, and those connections that feels like it, right? Like that's the dream.
Yeah. And that's a part that I remember having this conversation with a friend of mine so coming out of a creative writing program, I was a very literary writer for a very long time. And when my Oxford year was coming out, I was kind of apologizing for it to friends. I was like, this isn't what I was. I mean, like, I just wrote this thing. And I was such a little bitch about my own book. Like I was just so awful, but I was very much like, pay no attention to. And then I started getting those DMs at 2 a.m. from people being like, you've rewired my brain.
Yes.
I'm doing this. And I was talking to a friend who also came out of a creative writing program. And I said, what it realized for me is like, I didn't care about impressing people anymore. I just wanted to move people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he said, oh yeah, that's the difference. I still want to impress people.
I mean, and that's there, you're human. You always have that a little bit on some level, but it's not the main thing. It's not the main thing,
No.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. This was such a wonderful conversation. I'm just so happy you both join me today to chat.
I enjoyed this too.
It was amazing.
You both have some big things coming up, and I want to make sure before we sign off that you get to talk about them. Obviously, Julia, we're talking about Audiobrary. Please tell us when we can hear Casanova LLC, which is very soon.
Yes. Okay. So for quick context, the book within a book that the narrators were recording in Thank You for Listening was an 8-part audio series written by this like fictitious but legendary, iconic romance novelist, June French. And very simply, during the writing process of Thank You for Listening, this concept would not let me go. And the concept was such a jokey premise. It was a second chance romance with a gigolo descended from Casanova.
I love it.
And yet, I couldn't stop thinking about it and couldn't stop writing it. And so it is actually, the first episode is dropping on Valentine's Day through Audiobrary exclusively. And you can either pre-order just to get it as episodes, one every week, or you can fast track it and get it all at once. You can binge it. And then there's also a rabbit hole edition, which is kind of, I'm pitching it like the special bonus features on an old DVD where like there's interviews with the cast and some of the creators and just fun behind the scenes stuff. So.
Amazing. And quick bonus question for you, because I'm just so curious, because this is a book within a book, and the original book was published by Harper.
Yeah.
Were there any I mean, obviously it's your stories. What happened with the rights for that? Like,
that's a very good question. Because again, I think the screenwriter part of me, when I came up with this ridiculous idea, thought I still knew, even though it was like a joke, I knew it was the most commercial idea I'd ever had. And I didn't know what it was. And I certainly wasn't intending to do anything with it. But on the off chance that I wanted to write a screenplay or something of it later down the road, I carved it out.
Smart.
So
foresight. Look at the foresight.
Tried.
Worked out.
Yeah. Good thing.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so interesting.
Love that.
And Kennedy, before I ask you to share what's coming up next for you, which is also coming very soon, bonus question for you from our chat. I'm going to just pull it up. There was a question about who your dream cast is for Before I Let Go. If you're even able to, I don't know, maybe your dream cast is actually who's going to be in it. You can't talk about it, but if you can.
Well, it's so funny because we're at the stage, we got delayed because of the strike, last years. But as soon as the strike was over, we were like right back at it. So we're, finalizing things like showrunners, and we're just starting to work on casting. So I probably will, before it was actually going to be a show, I would always be like, oh my gosh, wouldn't it be fun if this was the person, if this was the person?
Mhm.
But I don't really say that much publicly anymore because there will actually be a person soon.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so I've stopped doing that, but I definitely do have a dream cast. And it was surreal for me because last week the producers are, I have just the best set of, it's John Legend, it's Malcolm D. Lee, who's behind the Best Man franchise. It's Deborah Martin Chase, who discovered Anne Hathaway, discovered Blake Lively. Like, she's now a Tony Award-winning producer. It's like God was just like, you get all of this, which is a big part of why we chose them. But it's just a dream group of producers. But we were talking last week about casting, and it's really surreal. It's really surreal to think, this is actually happening, and it still feels like it won't, until I keep telling my husband, until I'm actually like turning on the television and seeing it, it's not real. So but we are, it's fun to dream about, like, in a real way, not just like, who's your dream cast, but like, do you think that we could get them? Because I just saw them on this show and I know they're this deal, and but it's fun. It's a lot of fun.
That's so exciting. And in the meantime, you have a big release coming up that I know you're traveling all around everywhere to kind of shop around the book and get to have people meet you and sign their books and whatnot. Tell us what's coming for you.
Yes. Book 2 of the television thing is actually all 3 of these books. It's Before I Let Go, it's This Could Be Us, and it's book 3. So they've optioned the entire series, and the television show will be based on all of them.
Oh, amazing.
In however way we formulate that. But This Could Be Us is the second book that's coming out, and it comes out March 5th, and I'm going on tour, and it's going to be a whirlwind, and I'm probably going to hug a lot of people and sign a lot of books and take a lot of pictures. I'm very, very excited about it. So I'm really proud of this book, and it's very different from Before I Let Go for people who read that. And it's really a woman's journey of like reclaiming self. It's so funny because I'm like, this is a romance novel. And yet the woman, like, the biggest relationship in it is her falling in love with herself. And she literally says, what if I was the love of my own life? I'm like, okay. And yet it is a romance with an actual person. So we'll see how this goes.
And did you say it releases in March?
March 5th. Yes, March 5th.
March 5th.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations to you both on your soon-to-be releases, and thank you, and all of your success. And thank you so much for being with us today. This was just such a joy to get to talk to the both of you.
Thank you.
Gonna come on.
Thank you so much for joining us for the 8th Rosemoor Roundtable. You can follow today's guests on social media or find them on their websites, which we've linked in the details. To keep up with what's next on the Rosemoor Roundtable, you can subscribe to this podcast on YouTube or the app you're listening to now, or follow Samantha Brentmore at Ms_Brentmore or Rose Dioro at Rose Dioro VO on your social media platform of choice, where we will be promoting the next discussion, exploring crafting a story for audio with authors C.D. Reese and Kaylee Loring. Thank you to Brickshop Audio, our producer and distributor for the podcast, and thank you for listening. See you next time.